going to be really honest with you. Being a Star Wars fan hasn't been the most fun in the last few years. From the sequel trilogy's massively disappointing ending to a handful of Disney Plus shows with varying degrees of quality, it's clear to me that Disney Lucasfilm has been digging itself further and further into a creative rut of its own making. Because for the last 7 years, truly gutsy storytelling is something Star Wars has been toying with, but refusing to fully commit to. Almost every single Disney Lucasfilm offering since 2019 has felt like it's tiptoeing towards the edge of greatness, approaching the event horizon of brilliance, but nearly always pulling back from it. The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, even Kenobi to some extent, all of these have one glaring thing in common. They're all products of a studio that is afraid. Afraid of what, exactly? Well, everything, really. Everything that could potentially upset a small but loud section of its audience that demands that Star Wars return to its glory days, where laser swords ruled the screens, where the lines of good and evil were clearly drawn, where the story wasn't political, where women knew their place in the galaxy. Whatever that means. Except, wait a minute. That's never been what Star Wars is about. Star Wars was a story about finding strength in yourself against impossible odds, and how familial and, yes, even romantic love can topple the greatest of evils, including, but not limited to, fascist political dictators. It has always been about joy and loss, and the enormous sacrifices people make for the greater good, for a sunrise they'll never get to see. And when the implications of both the sacrifices and the sunrises are explored, when hope is lit like a bright flame in a pitch darkness, that's when Star Wars is at its most compelling. That's when these characters feel real to me. Out of all of the more recent Disney Lucasfilm offerings, Andor is the only one that really accomplishes this for me. Andor, and now the Acolyte. Hi, my name is Suchi, and welcome back to my channel, where I talk about the stories that I love and that inspire me. And I love Andor, but I'm not going to talk about it today, because I'm waiting for season 2 to come out so I can do a whole video discussing it in its entirety. Because it's just that iconic. It deserves an entire separate video of me yapping about how much I love it. I do it for him. And also all of them. But I couldn't just wait for another season of The Acolyte for me to talk about it on here. She is that girl, she is the moment, and I can keep my silence on the subject no longer. It's also because of the fact that another season of The Acolyte has not been renewed at the time of me filming this, but more on that later. The Acolyte was created and written by Leslie Headland of Russian Doll fame. The significance of the Acolyte's showrunner being a woman, a lesbian woman, is not lost on me, especially given the themes that this show eventually explores, but we'll get to that too. When they first announced that the Acolyte was going to be a thing a few years back, I was seated. I was seated for a Star Wars show 3 years in advance that would take place in an era of Star Wars I knew next to nothing about. I'm sorry, High Republic stans, I just wasn't one of you. I just never got on board that particular starship, but maybe now I am. So yeah, frankly, I didn't care about the High Republic era at the time, and yet the Acolyte was something I'd really been looking forward to. Why? Well, 2 things. 1, because of that insane cast. Amandla Stenberg, Lee Jung-jae, Carrie-Anne Moss, Manny Jacinto, Daphne Keane, Tommen Baratheon, cinema legends, every single one of them. The second was this poster, which features a lightsaber hilt from which protrudes a trail of bloodstains, and says, "In an age of light, a darkness rises." That's how you do marketing. So yeah, that cast and that poster was really all it took to get me to sit down and watch this show. But if I'm being honest, the initial plot didn't really do much for me. It starts off as a fairly simplistic tale about a pair of Force-sensitive twin girls who were separated as children, one of whom was taken in by the Jedi, and the other turned to a dark side master and is currently on a murderous rampage against those same Jedi. I saw the Acolyte being marketed as a Jedi whodunit, but as the show progressed, I can confidently say it is way more than just a fun little murder mystery in space. I honestly think Lucasfilm was trying to underwhelm us on purpose with the initial premise, because I don't think any of us really saw this coming. The Acolyte is the last Jedi of Lucasfilm's Disney Plus shows, both in the themes that it explores and the outsized fan reaction that it generated. But honestly, if I were Leslie Headland, I'd see this as a massive compliment. What's the point of art if it doesn't get talked about? So, let's discuss. The Acolyte centers on twins Osha and May, both played by Amanda Stenberg. Osha was a former Jedi Padawan but left the Order for reasons that aren't immediately revealed, so she spends her days just hanging out, fixing starships to earn her keep. We know much less about May, other than that she came under the tutelage of a mysterious masked figure, and she's on a mission to kill 4 specific Jedi. And both twins think the other is dead, until May turns up and kills Jedi Carrie-Anne Moss. The Jedi Order find out and initially think Osha's the culprit, so they send this guy to basically arrest her and bring her in for questioning. His name is Yord, and he constantly walks around like he has something incredibly long and metallic stuck up his behind. I wish I were exaggerating, but I'm not. This is how he sits. If he doesn't in fact have something shoved up there, I'll eat this microphone. His stern face never takes a vacation, not even for a girl he basically grew up with. Yord stands on business always. Spiritually, he is this guy from Andor if he had weird force powers. There's also Jecki, and she's the pookiest little pookie to ever exist. She's so small and capable and talented. Protect. I wish I could have protected her with my life. It also took me way too long to realize that it was Daphne Keene under all that makeup. She was little Jecki Jam all along. And finally, we have Master Soul, who had taken Osha under his wing when she joined the Jedi as a little girl. Except Osha is clearly more to him than just someone he simply trained, because that's not the look of a casual teacher reuniting with a student. That's a whole father looking at his daughter right there. I know what you are, Soul. You're a daddy. We aren't told why Osha left the Order until later on in the show, but it wasn't Soul's desired outcome, that's for sure. So it quickly becomes clear that Osha isn't the one who killed Carrie-Anne Moss, because another Jedi is murdered while she's in their custody. This time it's Tommen Baratheon. Oh, my mistake. Torben Baratheon. Torben's death was more interesting to me because he didn't put up a fight at all. He went willingly. He drank the poison May gave him like it was water, and he's suspiciously full of remorse about something, because people don't simply take a vow of silence for years on end unless they're hiding something. They also don't just go from this to this in a span of a few years unless, again, they're hiding some terrible secret. That kid was carrying some serious Jedi guilt there. Okay, so I realize 16 years isn't a few years. Like, that's a decent amount of time, but still, he can't be that old. This guy is at most like 30 by the time he dies. But his hairline begs to differ. So the Jedi are clearly hiding something. Because Osha was told her sister May died in a fire that May herself caused, that somehow also killed the rest of their family. Whatever we find out about Osha and May's backstory is through flashbacks, where we're taken back to a time just before everything went off the rails. These flashbacks take up 2 entire episodes and are very tonally different from the rest of the show in terms of pacing, but I'm honestly not upset by it because they do a decent job of world building and expanding the lore. The twins were born to a coven of lesbian witches, which is already so iconic. But it gets even better because it's hinted that the twins were conceived under mysterious circumstances. Circumstances we might call unnatural even. We're also introduced to some interesting new force powers, like possessing your enemies and turning into a cloud of dark smoke, which I can see how both of those things can be useful. I don't really get the anger at either these witches or their cool force abilities. I honestly think it's dumb to try and put limitations on what is essentially a limitless source of power. I think magic systems should have rules, yes, but in the case of the Force, rules don't really apply, and they never have. For me, these flashbacks were a good bit of world building. Would I have wanted more expansion on where these witches came from and how they developed their powers? Yes. My only real gripe about the Acolyte is how unevenly paced it is. There are some episodes that do take the time to flesh out what's going on with the plot and the characters, and then there are others that honestly just feel like they're straight out of a video game. Kind of like most of The Rise of Skywalker. Not a compliment, by the way. Just putting that out there. This is more of a thing in the earlier episodes, where they just keep using jump cut after jump cut, never really spending the necessary amount of time with any one character. This, along with some stilted dialogue, makes the first half of this show a little jarring to watch, but not for long, because he is coming. So, going back to the twins' backstory, they were being prepared for a ceremony called Ascension, the details of which are vague, to be honest, but I think that's intentional here. Because we're meant to see what happened in the past from the perspectives of both the twins and the Jedi. We're presented with multiple narratives of what happened, and only one of them is right. The person at the center of all of this is Osha. She was a fiercely independent child who didn't always want to hang out with her twin sister. She had different interests than May did, and what was unexpectedly nice about her mom is that she understood that. Well, the mom that was the leader of the coven. The other mom was chaotically protective of the twins and chose violence always, and I honestly can't blame her. So all of this is set in motion because these 4 Jedi turn up and demand to see the girls. Because only Jedi can train children in the ways of the Force, and every other Force discipline is immoral and crude, obviously. So the Jedi, including Sol, ask the witches if they can test the twins' Force powers. Mother Anastasia is initially against the idea, but agrees when Osha tells her she wants to go with the Jedi. We respect a mom that chooses to, well, mom. May isn't on board and lies throughout the whole test, but Osha genuinely wants to become a Jedi and chooses honesty. This is where the tension between Osha and May really ramps up, even though it's been steadily building all their lives. May just can't accept that her sister has different desires in life than she does, and Osha wants to forge her own path rather than follow the one already laid out for her by the witches. She wants to create her own identity rather than be an extension of those who came before her, and more importantly, she's allowed to do so. This is probably the most significant aspect of Osha's character, which I'll expand on later, but all I'll say for now is that it's really refreshing to see a young girl in Star Wars, specifically a girl of color, be given the space and freedom to find herself outside the shackles of legacy and bloodlines. It's just nice to see women discover their own power. Osha is told by Sol that May started a fire, and that's what led to the disaster that killed her entire Witch Coven family, including May herself. And Osha, who grew up thinking the Jedi are always the good guys, believed him. That is, of course, not the whole story, because May is alive, and has a vendetta against the Jedi who turned up unannounced and uninvited to their peaceful, witchy little lives. Something that's always bothered me about the whole concept of the Jedi Order is that they are obsessed with children. Specifically children that are, quite frankly, too young to understand what the hell is going on, and taking them away to be trained in the Jedi arts. Often these kids never see their families again, because a lot of the times they are poor and come from backwater worlds. And the Jedi couldn't be bothered to waste their energy on helping the people and the places that these kids come from. By the way, for all the dude bros yelling about how the Jedi are being ruined, this literally happened in the prequels. You know those 3 movies George Lucas wrote and directed himself? Yeah, those. This is literally how Qui-Gon discovered Anakin. The Jedi told Anakin that if he joined them, he could never see his mother again. And he loved his mother. His mom was a slave, and stayed a slave even after the Jedi took her son. The Jedi Order claims to center itself in the light side of the Force. Strange that a bunch of monks who worship the idea of compassion and goodness are the same ones who did nothing to free the slave mother of their chosen one. Because the Jedi have their own agenda. They always have, as Qui-Gon mentions here.
I didn't actually come here to free slaves.
The Jedi are also obsessed with maintaining power, so much so that they think nothing of the implications of separating very young children from their families forever. They think nothing of the emotional and psychological impacts of preventing their members from forming familial and romantic bonds.
Emotional damage!
Which, as we all know, was what led in part to the fall of Anakin Skywalker and the rise of Darth Vader. And what led Ben Solo to become Kylo Ren, if we're being real with ourselves. The Jedi have always been a deeply flawed organization, and I really appreciate the Acolyte diving exactly into where the cracks in the facade started appearing. We get subtle hints at first, like this one where Jecki is training with the other Padawans, and everyone in that room looks incredibly young. And again during the first flashback episode, where Sol suggests taking Osha in, and Indara tells him she's too old to be trained. Osha's 8 years old, by the way, at this point. So that's fun. I have this horrible feeling that the Jedi prefer taking in extremely young children because they're easier to indoctrinate. They want literal toddlers because their minds are prime for molding, and they're less likely to ask questions when they're older. And the younger they are, the faster they can be trained, and the sooner they'll be ready to take on dangerous missions, whether they're actually adults or not. We'll circle back to this later. Going back to the main plot, May has killed Torben Baratheon, and Sol convinces Osha to come with him to face her sister and their past. But along the way, the Jedi discover that May has an accomplice. It's this weird little guy. He's a little clumsy, a little shifty looking, just a silly goofy man who has a talent for mixing poison and also somehow can recite the entire Sith code from memory.
The Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace. And peace
is a lie, I know.
Interesting. Manny Jacinto, the man that you are. Look at the shift in his demeanor when he realizes that it's Osha he's talking to and not May. He's got the range. I think this is the moment where I realized something was up with this guy. That and the fact that he clearly has certain abilities with the way he dodged May's attacks and then disarmed her. Could it be? May and Osha briefly see each other again, and May is understandably shocked because she thought her sister was dead, and killing the Jedi was her means of exacting revenge. Osha and Sol realize that there are only 2 of the 4 Jedi on May's kill list still left alive, Kel Naka and Sol himself. Kel Naka is a Wookiee Jedi, which I was very excited about. I love Wookiees so much. I love that they are giant walking carpets. Slightly off topic, but there is this cookie jar that's been sold out forever, and it says Wookiee cookies on it with a little Chewbacca on it, and I've been waiting ever so patiently for it to come back in stock.
I know all about waiting.
Unfortunately, Kel Naka has basically exiled himself on a sparsely inhabited jungle planet. Even more unfortunately, he's dead. By the way, the Jedi and Osha are like trekking through this forest because Kel Naka is so incredibly off-grid that they need to hire this guy's help. His name is Basil, he's a professional tracker, and he constantly looks like he's about to sneeze. May and Kymer were also on that planet earlier, presumably to kill Kel Naka, but since discovering Osha is alive, May isn't quite as bloodthirsty for revenge. She just wants her sister back. She really said, bye, I don't want to be a Darksider anymore. I want to be loved now. Incidentally, this is also what happened to Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi. We love thematic continuity. She just leaves Kymer hanging, literally. Kinda iconic of her, I'm not gonna lie. But something's amiss here. Because when May finds Kel Naka, he's already been killed. This is genuinely one of the most terrifying scenes in all of Star Wars. A franchise that very much does not include horror in its repertoire. The dread and fear on her face when she realizes that her master is the one that killed him and is somewhere nearby. The way that this cloaked, masked figure floats down behind Osha like a ghostly wraith, with that creepy music playing in the background. I think from this moment on, The Acolyte became a different show for me. This was where the narrative finally found its footing. When I watched the scene, I remember thinking, I've seen this film before. And I didn't like the ending. At this point, I had a feeling I knew who was under the mask, but I still wasn't sure if I was right. But, as it turns out, that was never the surprise anyway. The real shocker was that nearly everyone dies. This episode, where the Jedi are dueling Darth Teeth, is simultaneously exhilarating and nerve-wracking all at once. Darth Teeth fights so dirty, it's not even funny. This is probably the most brutal lightsaber fight Star Wars has ever given us. Choreography is so good here. The moves have real weight to them, and each blow looks like it does genuine damage. But there's also an element of grace that makes all of these fight scenes look like a dance. Also, this was just plain cool. If you say otherwise, you are lying to yourself. I also want to point out how all the other random Jedi here are given the stormtrooper treatment. They're just so easily taken out by Darth biceps, it's laughable. But I also wonder if that was intentional here too, because out of all of the Force-sensitive people there, Osha was the only one to realize that they were surrounded by giant killer moths in the forest. I feel like they're alluding to the idea that the power of the Jedi in general is weakening. They're so far into their own heads that they're failing to observe what's happening right in front of them. Their ego is blinding them to the Force, literally. All except for my baby Jackie, who was so strong and capable, even though she's just a kid, and she dies. This genuinely shocked me because she was the one Jedi, other than Sol, who was giving Smilo Ren a hard time. She held her own against him so hard that he had to resort to cheating, and that's how she died. And then he snaps Yord's neck, just like that. This episode was the Red Wedding of Star Wars, in which almost every supporting character is brutally killed. They're really committing to this poster's aesthetic. Rest easy, my baby Jackie. You went out in a full blaze of glory. I think Jackie's death was particularly shocking because, as Sol says here, she was just a child. And yet...
You brought her here.
He's got him there. Oh, also, Darth Teeth is in fact the silly goofy guy Chimere from earlier. Halbrand is Sauron. I like that nobody on the internet was surprised at this. Everyone just collectively agreed that Manny is definitely playing a hot villain. And we were correct. So yeah, Master Soul just saw all of his Jedi buddies and his Padawan killed right in front of his eyes. So he goes kind of apeshit. He almost kills Darth Bortles here. One thing I noticed is that Chimera clearly isn't afraid to die. That's how committed to the dark side he thinks he is. Soul, on the other hand, is very much afraid of his darkness. That happens when you belong to a toxic positivity cult. But Soul obviously has some inner demons that he's struggling to keep contained. And it's only when Osha tells him no that he holds back. Osha. Sir, this is not the first time Osha has caught Chimera's attention, but there's no escaping it now. Anyway, let's fast forward. Osha and May are reunited at last. May is overjoyed, but Osha still thinks May is guilty of killing her family, so a fight breaks out. In the chaos, May knocks Osha out, steals her clothes, and just leaves her there in the middle of the jungle. Which I must admit made no sense to me, but I don't know, maybe she was gonna come back for her after she killed Soul. It's not super clear. May goes with Soul pretending to be Osha, and Osha is found by Chimera. The whole time I was watching this scene unfold, I kid you not, I could hear the explosive sound of a new ship forming in the ether, like a supernova. Oh, so we're really going this route, huh? I see how it is. Now we're watching television. And when I tell you I was seated for the next episode like you wouldn't believe. But even I couldn't foresee just how far my jaw could fall onto the floor, because the next episode opens with Osha waking up in a cave on an oceanic planet dotted with islands made of rocks and mist. Now I really think I've seen this film before. I felt so alive watching this episode because it's just Leslie Headland loudly proclaiming her love for The Last Jedi the whole time. Every aspect of this episode is a tribute to TLJ, right down to the mysterious ocean planet full of adorable weird little guys. But the loudest tribute of all is the protagonist coming face to face with the sad and lonely hot villain. Star Wars: The Rise of Oshimir, coming to a smut hut near you. The Last Jedi was a film about a girl discovering herself and her power after repeated run-ins with her enemy, with whom she forms a deeper connection with than anyone she'd met before. Her enemy has somehow also lost his shirt in the process, and she's doing her utmost not to gawk. The Acolyte is also that, but like dialed to 11. Because not long after Osha wakes up in an unfamiliar world, she witnesses the man she thought was her enemy stripping down. He does not stop at his shirt this time. It's the whole package now. They're not even trying to be subtle with the female gaze here. It's all out here in the open. Star Wars is sexy now. I mean, it was back then too, but this time they aren't downplaying it in the slightest.
How does it feel?
Sir, how does what feel exactly?
I'm wondering if it's honorable to kill me like this.
My guy, I really don't think that's what's on her mind at this exact point in time. You're literally standing in front of her dripping wet, in the nude. Be just a little for real right now. The reason all of this feels so familiar is that Kylo Ren, too, appeared before the girl he likes with no clothes on and asked her to face the truth, just like Chimera does here. He's so slick about it, too. Like, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's trying to turn on the smolder. I mean, it's working. And just like Kylo Ren, he spits straight facts about how the Jedi, whom she once thought of as her family, discarded her like trash. But she isn't trash. Not to him. But here's where the Acolyte really became that girl for me.
And his strength in the Force is very powerful.
You think that his strength? That's your strength in the Force, Osha.
Hearing this line after watching The Rise of Skywalker burn down literally everything good about the sequels was cathartic to say the least. Darth Teeth was so quick to point out that her power is hers alone. That it didn't come from training with Soul. It didn't come from being connected to someone already powerful. Anyone can cook. This is what should have been Rey's journey all along, and it could have been had the studio execs not gotten spooked by incels on Twitter 7 years ago. As far as the Acolyte Season 1 goes, they seem to not be making the same error twice, so I'm hopeful for where they take Osha's story. Maybe this will be the movie where I like the ending. I certainly appreciate that they're making Star Wars romantic again.
Below the surface of consciousness are powerful emotions. Anger, fear, loss, desire.
It's not so much an I can fix him enemies to lovers arc like Raylo, it's more of a corruption arc. They can both make each other worse. But I don't fully believe this either, at least in Chimere's case, because we do see him lean more towards the light rather than dark at multiple points in the show. He heals Osha's injuries when he finds her in the forest, which is a light side ability. We also see that he's deeply concerned for Osha's well-being when she puts on his helmet and starts having strange visions. Aligning with the dark side is almost always a selfish act, putting yourself above others, no matter the situation. But Chimere doesn't seem to subscribe to this at all. Yes, he murdered a bunch of Jedi. I haven't forgotten that he killed Jackie Poo, but it was mostly in self-defense. What's interesting about him is that he isn't afraid to lose his life for the things that he believes in. Unlike most Sith we've seen before, who always feared death. He offers himself and his teachings to Osha for basically nothing in return. He never expects anything from Osha. All he ever asks of her is the opportunity to train her. He just wants a friend. Okay, perhaps more than a friend. Also, as an aside, I just need to point out that he really waited for several hours until Osha woke up to then casually walk past her and strip down and take a bath in front of her. His timing was way too immaculate to be a coincidence. This man is on a mission. We have to respect that. I also really loved the scene where Osha tries on Chimere's helmet. It definitely took me back to like 2016 when fan art of Rey trying on Kylo's helmet was popular. But I also think it was a way to show us that Osha is open to seeing things from Chimere's point of view. Because let's be real here, he's probably the first person outside of her family who's ever been honest to her. He bared his soul to her and, in turn, helped her voice her own deepest, darkest fears. This is romance. It's also how you tell a good character-driven story. Only the best Star Wars has its characters going from antagonists to completely down bad for each other and crying. Cinema! Meanwhile, Sol is devastated at what's happened. Every single Jedi he brought with him is now dead. I have to give Lee Jung-jae his flowers here, because this scene is like a minute straight of him just emoting his pain and anguish, which I always think he did really well, particularly in Squid Game. Sol realizes that it's May that's on his ship with him and not Osha. May confronts him about what the Jedi did to her family, and chaos ensues again. We get another flashback episode, and it's basically what we were suspecting all along, which was that the Jedi were sticking their noses into places they had no business being in. Sol discovers the witch coven while they're on Brendok, and for some reason immediately assumes that they're mistreating Osha and May.
They do not treat the girls like children.
Oh, and the Jedi do? Sir? The Jedi are clearly framed here as the de facto force police in the galaxy. Like, if you don't use your force powers their way, you're basically a criminal. Which is what led to Sol killing their mother. She used the force in a way that was unfamiliar to him, therefore it was wrong. Just made him uncomfortable. Overall, this was a good commentary on how not to jump to conclusions when presented with new information, because people can get killed, or at the very least, seriously maimed. Again, the lightsaber duels here were really nicely choreographed, especially Sol versus possessed Kelnaka, but Torben Baratheon's moves here also get an honorable mention. Very smooth, very reminiscent of the prequels. I must mention here that we got another interesting piece of lore. The fact that Brendok is said to be a vergence in the Force, which was the power that created life on this planet. Nowhere else was a vergence? Here. And also here, where Ben Solo was last seen in the flesh, where he mysteriously disappeared. Interesting. Very interesting. I wonder if all of these vergences are connected in some way. Through a series of doors, or pathways if you will, in a hidden universe beyond space and time. Yes, I'm a Ben Solo is alive truther. I will die on this hill. He's just stuck in the world between worlds currently, but he'll come back to his wife. One day.
They'll be back. One day.
Sol chases May back to Brendok after she confronts him about killing her mother. And he wasn't flying like he was politely trying to catch her. He was trying to mow her down. That isn't very light side of you, Master Sol. Osha finds out about this and rushes off Chimere's cozy little island planet. And Chimere is just so gone for her that he pretty much just lets her do whatever she wants. I love that she's like, I'm going to confront them, and I'm going to take your ship to get there. And he's like, but that's my ship. And she just goes, and what about it? And that impresses him so much that he can't help but ask her to train with him one last time. Like I said, down horrendously bad. But he just ends up going with her, and he's just yapping away at what they need to do, and she just shuts his comms off. She said, "Be quiet, old man. I'm trying to think." Before I forget, what in the jump scare hell was this? Have they seriously been roommates with Darth Plagueis this entire time? Has he been watching them flirt shamelessly all day long? This is yet another commonality between Reylo and Oshamir. Neither one can seem to escape the voyeuristic, wrinkly old Sith lurking nearby. May their privacy rest in peace. So our main characters all collide on Brandok, where it all began. Osha goes to confront May because she still doesn't accept that the Jedi ruined their lives. Kymir runs into Sol. Great lightsaber battles yet again, and this transition in particular was pretty sick. But I think the best juxtaposition between scenes is the one where Master Sol finally lays it all out in front of Osha and May. He's the one who killed their mother. He was the catalyst for every single thing that went to shit all of those years ago. And something inside Osha snaps. She's not at all interested in what excuses Sol has to give. The man who loved her like a daughter was also the one who took her mother from her. By the way, Sol drops a bombshell claim that May and Osha are the same person, and that they were artificially created somehow using the power of the Force Virgins on their home planet. I had a feeling that their backstory would be something kooky like this, and it's honestly a cool piece of lore. It's unique, it's interesting. I would like to know more, please. Too bad I'll never know now. I'll come back to that in a second. So, Osha kills a Jedi without a weapon, which is the original task Kymir had given May when she was still his apprentice. But to me, the task was always kind of ambiguous. Like, did it mean she had to kill an unarmed Jedi? Or did she have to kill a Jedi while being unarmed herself? But Osha had taken Sol's lightsaber from him, so he didn't have a weapon on him. And she force-choked him to death, so she didn't use any weapons to kill him, which I think was a nice way of keeping the double meaning intact. But Sol's whole demeanor here is pretty heartbreaking. He still could have overpowered her, he could have stopped her from choking him, but he very pointedly doesn't do that. He let her kill him because the burden of the truth was finally lifted from his shoulders, and he chose to leave himself at her mercy. They framed this shot exactly the same way that they did this one from the earlier flashback episode, and seeing them go from this to this is honestly so tragic. But also Sol did this to himself, like all the Jedi did in the end. So there's that. One character I didn't mention is Vernestra, who, by the way, is played by Leslie Headland's wife. It's heavily implied that she was Kymir's master back in the day, judging from his reaction to her when she shows up, and the fact that Kymir's scars on his back look suspiciously like lashes from a whip. I keep going back to this poster, I know, but I really can't stop thinking about it because it implies that darkness rose because of the light. I think that's alluded to when Kymir leaves the Jedi after falling out with Vernestra, and again with Osha giving in to the dark side when she kills her former master and father figure. By the way, we also finally get to see a Kyber crystal bleeding on screen, a moment most pleasing to me in my own Sith career. Osha appears to be a Darksider now, but I honestly don't think that's true. I also don't think that the rising darkness the show has been building up to is either Osha or Kymir. I think it's the pride and hubris of the Jedi Order. The actions of the Jedi are what caused literally every single thing to go wrong in Osha's life. And probably Kymir's too. All because, again, they're more concerned with preserving their way of life and their power in the galaxy than silly little things like emotional well-being. But, as we all find out eventually at some point in our lives, bottling up your feelings is never the answer. All it does is explode and hurt everyone in the end. In the last episode, this senator character turns up at the Jedi Temple and, for like a minute straight, spits the hardest truths about the Jedi right to Vernestra's face, and then leaves immediately. This man really had one job, and that was to deliver one of the greatest smackdowns in galactic history. He didn't even need lightsabers to destroy the Jedi here. All he needed was a functioning brain cell and a mouth to form the words that would call her out on her BS. By the way, I'm not opposed to the idea of there being Jedi. I think the concept of centering yourself in positive vibes and compassion is really what life should be about in the end. That's what Luke chose to be in the OG trilogy. But there comes a point where you become obsessed with controlling yourself and your emotions and your personal relationships in a way that's neither healthy nor even normal. It's not healthy to take kids from their families. It's not normal to look down on familial or romantic relationships and force the members of your cult to detach themselves from others. Some people are built for that monk life, but not everyone. But the Jedi decided they should put everyone in that one box. They stopped asking themselves what they wanted from life as individuals and prioritized the goals of the collective order with no second thoughts. And what did they get after all this? Darth Vader and the complete annihilation of the Jedi Order, which is why this moment right here is so important. After Osha kills Sol, she and May only have a short time before they're found and arrested by the Jedi. And May asks her sister, "What do you want?" Because the Jedi never once asked her that, not without ulterior motives. Once again, it's just so nice to see a girl in Star Wars get to voice her desires and choose her fate, rather than being a vessel for any other character who came before her. Haven't seen that energy since The Last Jedi, and frankly, I'm not sure we ever will again. Why? Because The Acolyte has been cancelled after just one season. But before I dive into that mess, I just want to point out how healing the ending was for me personally. Osha offers to take May's place as Chimere's acolyte, basically freeing May from her agreement with her former master. May, in turn, decides to turn herself in so that Osha can escape with Chimere somewhere the Jedi can't follow. It's an emotionally charged moment, and seeing the two sisters embrace each other after years of separation and strife felt earned. And as they do so, Chimere wipes May's memory so that when the Jedi catch up to her, she won't be able to divulge any information on Osha's whereabouts. The sisters part ways with the promise that they'll see each other again, and we finally get to see the girl taking the bad boy's hand. Well, more like he takes her hand, but whatever. Semantics. Just this shot right here. This is everything that we should have gotten at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. A girl standing side by side with her very much alive man, staring into the sunset, ready to live their lives the way they want to. The ending stuck the landing because we stayed true to the George Lucas way. He too believed in the enduring power of characters walking off hand in hand into the sunset. In terms of going forward, I think Osha and Chimere's arc is probably going to land somewhere in between the two extremes of light and darkness. A nice even gray. A balance, if you will. Will we ever get to see this play out on screen? That depends on whether or not Disney wants to tell new and compelling stories going forward, or fall back onto what's safe and what will sell the most toys. The Acolyte is the first Disney Star Wars production that takes place outside of the Skywalker timeline. It introduced a whole cast of characters, storylines, and world-building elements not seen on screen before. It also explored a lot of honestly mature themes, like the dangers of being in a weird religious cult, or giving in to your deepest, darkest desires. I know so many people who got into Star Wars because of The Acolyte, because it didn't require having to watch a dozen films or multiple seasons of an animated show in order to have context. But with The Acolyte's cancellation, you're not going to get those more casual viewers to watch Star Wars. By only pushing shows and films that center around the Skywalker saga, Disney essentially is only catering to those hardcore fans who've already done the considerable amount of homework. Telling stories that only happen within a specific timeline or only showcase certain characters not only reduces your potential audience, but also limits your creativity in a big way. And as we're seeing on the Marvel side of the House of Mouse, this will quickly translate into very real financial losses. I also want to point out the speed at which The Acolyte was cancelled. The announcement came barely 5 weeks after the final episode premiered. The show had only been out in its entirety for like a month. Word on the street is that Disney, at least in part, blames low viewership for their decision. But in what world is a month enough time for anything to find a solid audience? This is a larger problem with the streaming model in general. These shows with enormously bloated budgets are greenlit for only one season at a time and then scrapped altogether after spending only a few weeks out in the world. Again, the exception to this, in Disney's case, is Andor, but that's a video for another day. Shows just aren't allowed to organically build audiences over time anymore. If they're not immediately a viral hit, they aren't going to be continued past the first season. And that's a damn shame, because I know for a fact that shows like The Office or even The Clone Wars wouldn't have made it past season 1 had they come out in the streaming era. Because let's be real, their first seasons didn't exactly hit the ground running. It took time to develop their stories and their characters over multiple seasons to become as beloved and iconic as they are today. Disney also apparently named The Acolyte's high budget as a factor in its cancellation. And yes, that is an insanely high budget. But to me, that's not an excuse to not continue it. The right showrunners will always find a way to tell their stories for less. Simply don't spend so much money in future seasons. Lastly, The Acolyte was cancelled, at least in part, because Disney is afraid. As we saw in 2017, a very small section of fans, who are mostly white men living in their mom's basements, are screaming their rage and discontent at having to watch Star Wars be ruined once again. The irony is that Disney is trying, and failing as we saw in 2019, to cater to a group of people who will never be satisfied with anything they come out with. No matter what, they will always hate Disney Star Wars. Why are you as a company trying to appease a section of your audience that refuses to be happy? All they can do is leave nasty comments on all of your social media posts, which can be deleted, by the way. Or they can yell about it on their YouTube channels or wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, the depths of their rage is something that needs to be studied. Why are they getting so worked up over fictional space wizards? It's all fake, my sisters. Whatever is bothering you, it's not real. It can't hurt you out here. But these kinds of people aren't what make a fandom. It's the theorizers, the artists, the fanfic writers, the headcanonists. They're making drawings and stories and meta-analyses celebrating your work. They are the fans you as a company should be catering to. Why? One, because they're basically giving your shows free promo. All of that art and speculative tweets get circulated around the internet, which then gets shown to random viewers who happen to be scrolling past. And that's how they get to know about your show. And two, because these people are fueled by genuine passion and excitement for something that you made. They're inspired enough to take time out of their day to create things based on your IP, and then they put it out there for other people to enjoy. Why are you instead listening to a bunch of weirdos who yell angrily on the internet for a living? Why are you constantly basing your creative decisions around a group of people who spend their days harassing your actors and shouting out empty criticisms about your shows and films? I'm not negating the value of genuine criticism. It absolutely has its place. It makes us better at any craft. And I think we should all be able to point out a piece of media's perfections and flaws without getting blasted for having an opinion. But saying things like Star Wars is dead now, or this is woke, or women ruin Star Wars doesn't ultimately mean anything. Because what are you actually trying to say? Do y'all even understand what woke means in this context?
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
I feel like people are just mindlessly parroting these terms around because they sound edgy. You want to sound like those guys on that podcast you listen to because they seem so cool and enraged. And together you will form a rebellion that will save Star Wars from the woke empire. It's like trying to give an updated version of a chocolate chip cookie recipe or something and having a horde of angry cookie purists screaming about how much they hate brown butter because it makes the cookies a different color. No notes about how the depth of the flavor increases, or how the texture becomes perfectly chewy and toffee-like though. Speaking of this, some guys were mad that the Acolyte's casting barely had any white people in it. Well, I raise you luck, Shay. I love him so much. Protect him at all costs. Also, there were plenty of white people in this cast, but you were bothered because they weren't the main characters. But don't worry, Luke Skywalker still exists, and he'll keep coming back year after year, show after show, each time in the form of a new and extremely terrifying deepfake of 1977 Mark Hamill, because that's our reality now. We'll never move on from the OT era. Somehow, Luke Skywalker returned every single time. The Acolyte definitely had its flaws. It was weirdly paced at some points, and the runtimes were too short for the scale of the story it was trying to tell. These are real criticisms. If the story structure doesn't make sense, or if a character's motivations are confusing, or if the way something's acted or directed, those are real criticisms, because you're pointing out something tangible that can be fixed. Calling something woke isn't a criticism because it's just so shapeless and vague. It's not really saying anything about the flow of the plot, or how something's acted, or the direction, or the characters. Therefore, it means nothing. It's just an empty word. It has no weight. Which is why those bad faith comments below nearly every Star Wars social media post are so funny, because it just makes those people sound like their heads are full of helium. It's all circus music up there. Not a single brain cell to be found between their eyes. We deserve more seasons of The Acolyte, even though it isn't a perfect show. Because it has great ideas. It's something fresh and out of the box, which Star Wars desperately needs because we really need to get off these desert planets. We really need to move away from Uncanny Valley Luke Skywalker. There's a whole galaxy out there waiting to be explored. Billions of planets and creatures and people. Why not tell their stories? Guys, thank you so much for listening to me yap about Star Wars yet again. I promise to keep doing it. If you're like me and you want to see The Acolyte renewed for more seasons, please sign up at the petition link down below. We have tens of thousands of signatures on there already. It's what the people want. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts on The Acolyte down below. I hope you have a great day wherever you are, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!